Welcome to Season 3 of Time and Materials, a construction-only podcast that's powered by livecost.com, where we sit down with interesting people doing interesting things in construction. These construction experts kindly give us their time so that you can walk away with greater insights to make better day-to-day decisions in your construction career. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Time and Materials podcast. This week, we're joined by Colm McHugh, who's the Centre Manager of Construct Innovate. So Colm has a vast experience as a senior manager and chartered engineer, but he's brought that experience now into what I believe to be a very interesting concept, which is Construct Innovate. So the idea behind bringing industry and academics together to understand how we can better digitise construction. So in this episode, we dig into Colm's background and some of the visions that they have around digitising construction in Ireland. So please sit back, enjoy, and I hope you get some value from my chat with Colm McHugh, Centre Manager of Construct Innovate. Colm, you're very welcome to the Time and Materials podcast. It's great to have you. Thanks for giving us your time.
Thanks, Ciaran. Glad to be here.
Let's kick off with a little bit about just frame up how we arrived, I suppose, at this conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and I suppose how you ended up working with Construct Innovate?
Yeah, so I'm the newish Centre Manager for Construct Innovate, which is the new National Construction Technology and Innovation Centre based out of the University of Galway. Now, I'm not an academic, that's not my background. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I have a master's in renewable energy, and I've done another little bit of postgrad studies outside of that in energy efficient buildings and the likes. But my background is in academia. I've spent about 17 years working kind of across the spectrum of the construction industry in Ireland and abroad. I started out as a mechanical designer in water and wastewater projects in a consultancy environment back in the early 2000s. Spent a good number of years on site delivering some of those kind of projects, and I did what a lot of people do and went to Australia for 3 or 4 years back around 2011. I spent time as the client representative as well, worked for HSE Estates for a number of years, delivering large capital projects. And then the last 4 years before I've taken up my current role, I was a startup subsidiary of a German manufacturer and supplier of equipment into the civil side of the sector. So I've sort of been around a little bit and seen the industry from a lot of different sides, which I suppose is something I'm going to be leaning on in the new role I'm after taking on.
What we were actually in Australia around the same time. What part of Australia did you go to?
Again, I travelled around a lot. I was in Canberra working with the Water Corporation there, and I was in Perth and for a number of years designing a couple of grey water treatment plants for the mines, and then I spent about 2 years up in Karratha actually delivering those projects up in northwest Australia, up near Broome, back and beyond.
Yeah, know it well. Spent 7 good years in Perth actually, so I know the market quite well. That actually would have been where I transitioned from day-to-day site work and running jobs into running my own companies, and that would have been my first introduction actually into the differences between being on site and getting the hands dirty to going in behind a laptop. How did you find that, like from where you are, I suppose, your background to what you're doing today?
I always liked the process of actually being there when stuff is built, so I really enjoyed site work. Some of the stuff we were doing up in Karratha was on a massive scale. Like you had Moxie trucks flying around the site that were bigger than your house. And that sort of scale of civil engineering, and then the mechanical side that I was on was always something that was really interesting to me. So I liked the part of getting my hands dirty. The mornings where it was 40 degrees at 6 o'clock in the morning, they weren't as much fun, but certainly the stuff in Australia, it was probably the steepest learning curve of my career, because you really had to learn how to troubleshoot on site, especially on big projects with massive value. You had to learn how to figure out problems as you went, and that was probably the biggest learning I had when I was up there, was having to do that on site in real time, if you like.
We had the famous 38 out the gate the old saying in Perth, you'd have a thermometer sitting on the toolbox, was waiting for a mercury to
Yeah.
hit 38, and you're home full pay. How did that
We,
work in the mines?
well, we actually, I was surprised because I was expecting for us to be heated off site sometimes, but we actually had more of a problem when there was a little bit of drizzle. The lads had all down tools and head for the sheds. They could deal with a massive amount of heat, but any type of rain at all, they were gone. They were gone off the site as quick as possible. So that was a bit of a surprise to me because I told them, God, lads, if we were like this in Ireland, we wouldn't get anything done at all. So
yeah. The
a different mindset.
the Aussies I always say the Aussies have it figured out. Like, we went over there full of ambition, full of energy and drive, and wanting to work hours. And I used to always remember working with our Aussie co-workers. 3 o'clock, tools gone out the door, and I said, these guys just for years I said these guys are lazy and they don't want to get their hands dirty, and there's no interest. As the years go on, you look back and you say, them guys have it figured out. They were the ones casting fishing rods into the water at 3:30 every day, or going for a swim or a surf or something like that, while we were sweating up on the scaffolding. But good days all the same. Learned a lot. I've actually got a lot of time for Australia. Some really good memories. So what is Construct Innovate? What are you doing in there on a day-to-day basis? And I suppose what's Construct Innovate looking to achieve?
Yeah, so Construct Innovate, it's the new National Research Centre for construction, essentially. It's part of the Enterprise Ireland Industry-Led Technology Centre programme. And what it's trying to do is, it was launched in December last year by the then Taoiseach and now Taoiseach Liam Ranker. We're still very much in the early stages of the journey. We're kind of in startup mode, if you like. But what the remit of the centre, the value proposition of the centre is, it's trying to bring academia and industry in construction in Ireland together through membership of the centre to try and tackle the industry-led challenges and problems that organisations who are involved in construction in Ireland have, by directing funding and research resources towards looking at those problems. So what Ireland needs to do is move the construction sector and transition it to become a more modern, a more sustainable, a more a productive sector of the economy if it wants to achieve what the targets that are set for it, if you like. And what we want to do, or how we want to support the industry in doing that, is by involving and collaborating with industry and academia to produce valuable, industry-led, impactful research. I suppose.
So who's like
Sorry,
when you say we bring academics and industry together, like what would a typical company or person look like from the industry side? Like who's getting involved in this?
We're not prescriptive. We want anyone with a stake in the construction industry to engage with Construct Innovate, be it on the academic side, be it on the state body side, policyholders at department level, and also the whole supply chain of the construction industry. So from tier one contractors down to the smallest SMEs, we see a place for them in research. Some of the challenges that we have in setting up the centre is first of all, there's 57,000 companies in construction in Ireland, and 94% of them are less than 6 people. So the majority of the supply chain across the industry are SMEs. So we have to engage with them. We have to try to offer them something of value, and on both ends, when they come into the centre, engage with the centre, and also the outputs that come out of it. I suppose the other challenge for the centre as we're setting up here is, unlike other sectors of the economy like pharma, health, and manufacturing sectors like that, there's a history of research. A lot of the productivity and the way they go about things is based on a history of research and a history of funding into research in that sector of the economy. Construction isn't really like that. So we're trying to engage with companies who have no history of research and demonstrate to them where the value is in doing that. So yeah, to answer your question, the whole supply chain is who we're trying to engage with.
Has there been any sort of research done to where we are today? Like where's the starting point? Like how do we compare to say the UK or Germany or any of those sort of countries in mainland Europe or even Australia, for example? Is there a benchmark that we're trying to get to?
Yeah, so there was a detailed description in the needs report commissioned by Ernst & Young by Enterprise Ireland a number of years ago into the state play of the construction industry in Ireland, where the challenges are and where it needs to go. And one of the recommendations of that report was the establishment of a construction technology centre where there could be a national focus on research around construction challenges. So that's kind of where the background is, and the reason it was commissioned was the government wanted to know: are we going to be able to deliver on the national delivery plan, on the national development plan? Sorry, the climate action plan, housing for all, and part of the solution was, if we engage companies in research, they can help themselves become more productive and more sustainable, more digitalized, but also to tackle some of the bigger challenges that we have, across the industry.
You mentioned one there, housing for all, which would be close to my day to day. Like if you look at one area there, which is probably the biggest issue we have at the moment, is housing. Like what research is being done to say help deliver more housing, or to reach those housing for all targets? Like what would is there a current project or is there a project in the pipeline that would help us to get there?
Yeah. So part of the brief focuses on coming up with solution to industry challenges, but particularly residential construction. So in the first 3 years. So I suppose the way I like to think of it is there's a weighted focus towards research into housing topics in the first number of years of the centre. It's not that we're ignoring infrastructure or other really important parts of the construction industry. You can't really deliver houses unless your infrastructure is in place there. But because it's such a critical issue in the economy at the minute, there's a specific focus on that. We're undertaking a number of specific research projects with the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage at the moment on housing topics. What we're doing at the minute is mainly shorter duration projects. They're kind of called pathfinder projects to show the way on a certain topic. And we hope to have most of them completed by the end of November. So just sort of some examples would be there's a project being led by the Timber Energy Research Group out of the University of Galway about increasing the use of homegrown C16 timber in housing construction. We have another on design for manufacture and assembly, and that's another project led by Brian Broderick out of TCD. That's as this construction industry moves or starts to expand into MMC, which I'm sure a lot of listeners would have heard of already. Modern methods of construction are sort of modular offsite construction techniques to deliver, which is part of the housing solution. Certainly the government see it that way. But you have to also design your projects, your houses, for example, to be able to be manufactured offsite. So part of that is how are we going to upskill the sector to be the professional services part of the sector to be able to design so that we can build our houses, predominantly off-site and then bring them to site and click them together for want of a better term. We have some projects into standards, testing, certification, and accreditation for the delivery of housing. So how are they delivered at the minute, and is there a better way of doing it? So those kind of projects are what we've got ongoing at the minute. They're generally short-term projects because we want quick turnaround, and the Department of Housing also want the pathway put forward to them to say, right, here's the next steps, here's where the gaps are.
So if a company, let's say the housing project for it is take that as an example, you guys would look to engage the market, engage the developers, engage the builders. Is this like face-to-face type project stuff, or is it more like research done on the academic side where we're sort of making calls into the company? Like, how does a project come together?
Lots of different ways, to be honest. Research is predominantly academic led. Right? Where we see industry playing a part is by first of all bringing the challenges to the academics. So the industry organizations, be it tier one contractors or the small SMEs, they know what the problems are on site every day. We are not here to deliver theoretical academic output in terms of, vast quantities of publications. That's not what the industry needs. What the industry needs is, valuable applied research that can have an impact on sites as quickly as possible. So through the membership model, we have industry organizations join up, state bodies, semi-states, and academics, and they all become different types of members. And we have events like we had an academic industry meeting day where we workshopped a number of challenges that were put forward by our industry members across the day. And where the academics come in then is from those challenges and from those discussions to be able to tease out the research projects that can be taken out of them, if you like. So given the expertise and the academic knowledge that exists, how can we use that to carry out research to tackle the problem that you're bringing to us? So that's, and then through the projects, there's a lot of different ways where industry can engage. So for example, if we want to carry out if we want to get operational data on how new energy efficient homes are performing, we can get some of our developers to allow us to install sensors in their projects so we can get that data back to analyze it and to see, are they really operating the way they were designed, create that feedback loop, and then inform decisions on, well, policy, but also design as to, well, actually, there's better ways of doing this than we're currently doing. So it's about active engagement of our industry members. We want them to tell us what the problems are and then help the academics however they can to solve them.
You mentioned from tier one to SME there. I spend a lot of time with SMEs, and one thing that pops up a lot of time when we talk about any type of digital transformation is comments like, sure, that's just BIM, and I've no interest in BIM, or BIM has no value to me. Them events are targeted towards tier one contractors that have innovation teams, and where BIM is a top of the agenda. I suppose from a small to medium sized contractor point of view, like what's your take on BIM, and is there a value there, or will there be a value there for a small to medium sized contract?
Yeah, well, I suppose there's a little bit of carrot and stick here. Like the government have mandated BIM on public projects, and that will be filtered down through the sector over time. It'll start on very big projects, and it'll be filtered down into smaller projects, and the private sector will uptake that because the government need to lead out on this transformation, and BIM is part of that solution. I suppose what's important to say is that digitalization and BIM aren't necessarily the same thing. So your own company, you deliver software as a service, that is a digital tool. Even things like DocuSign and e-signatures, that is a digital tool. There are lots of ways that small companies can start to digitalize their companies and become more efficient as a result. So digitalization is really a tool to become more efficient rather than the old paper exercises that there's just so much information on projects now, we can't deliver it with the traditional sort of Excel tools and paper-based methods. It has to move into the software space. So I suppose there needs to be a little bit of education around digitalization. Isn't just a big scary word that is BIM. It's a lot of different things. It's the same as innovation. Innovation can be a really scary word, but a lot of companies, especially small companies, have to be agile and problem solve every day. And a lot of that is innovation. So breaking down some of those big terms can be important. On the BIM side of things, what I would encourage smaller companies to do is to at least educate themselves on what BIM is and how it might affect them in the future. Maybe they don't have to be BIM ready right now, but the sector is going in that direction, and something that Construct Innovate aims to do is to be able to provide some of that sort of training material, like through webinars and content like that, so that smaller companies, smaller members of the centre can engage and upskill and educate themselves on what way the industry is going.
It's absolutely critical, isn't it? Like if we think about it, like if the top tier of the industry flies away and gets digitized. And as you say, your stats on the actual scale of when we look at the percentage of the industry of how much of it is actually small to medium size, and if they're not digitized or they're not thought about or they're not incentivized even to come on that digital journey, you're going to have this massive divide in the industry whereby top of the tier is 100% sufficient, really digitally sophisticated, and then you've got this bottom of the tier that's going to be like 20 years behind. And
Yeah.
it's, I suppose that's the challenge, isn't it? How do we bring everybody along on the same journey?
Well, tier one contractors are only as good as their supply chains. That's the reality of it. It's the supply chains that feed into these construction projects. So they can only go so far ahead before their supply chain starts to hold them up, if you like. And the transition of the sector to this more modern, sustainable, digitalized sector, if you like, it has to happen en masse. Um, so it's really important that there's concerted effort put into place to um, upskill this SME sector in the digital space, but also provide them with opportunities to upskill and explain to them or demonstrate to them where the value is in it for them. A lot of the challenge that we're going to have in Construct Innovate and engaging with all the small companies that exist out there is that they're really busy people. They're already at 100% capacity. They don't have spare human capital to be invested in research, and a lot of the time they don't have a lot of the financial capabilities to invest in significantly in research as well. So part of what we need to do is to be able to support them to get on that journey, see the value that they can get by engaging in it, and that's how the transition can be supported by the centre.
We do a piece on this podcast where we try and jump into three questions, and I'll throw a couple at you. What's the best piece of business or career advice you've received?
Might sound like a silly one. The best piece of advice, or the piece of advice that has stuck with me, I got very early in my career, was you have to know when to say no. I found a lot of people, maybe it's just construction, maybe it's across the economy, they just find it very difficult to say no when they're asked to take on more and more, and it actually doesn't help. We can't create time, so if time's finite, if time is finite, then you can either increase your resources or reduce quality to get more done. People have a maximum capacity; they can't duplicate themselves. So generally, it's quality that suffers. And you put yourself under more and more pressure, then errors start to creep into your work. It was a director in a consultancy that I worked with when I first graduated told me, learn how to say no when you're full, and then make sure that you have the time to do your job properly first time, because that's really where you get efficiency, doing it right the first time. That's probably the best piece of advice I've got.
Couldn't argue with that, could you? I mean, no matter what I found, even like from contracting days, word of mouth was everything. Like your word and your reputation was nearly everything for continuing to win projects. And then as I've transitioned into another side of construction, it's still the same thing. Like we're massively grown by word of mouth. Like one company will take us on, we do a good job. That company, we get them implemented, get them up and running, and then it's a recommendation comes on to the next word, the next company. So yeah, you couldn't argue with that. We also try to understand your own thoughts around where the industry is at. Like, so if I was to ask a question around if you had no resource constraints, what would you change about construction?
But no resource constraints. I suppose I would like to adequately resource the planning system in the country. We think we do need to rethink the planning system in Ireland, kind of at all levels. But I think under resourcing of it at the moment has been allowed to develop, and it's a really big contributory factor to the delays and the bottlenecks that's in our planning system at the minute. I suppose what I do appreciate is the challenge that you just can't magic experience planners out of thin air. And if you do want to bring them in from abroad, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do in Ireland, because it's like a vicious circle. Where are you going to house them? Where are these people going to live when they come here? So if I had all the resources in the world, I'd like to start there. another
Is that
part.
a problem? Is that a problem, Colin, that you guys have looked at in Construct Innovate? And like, would that be a project?
It could be in the future. I suppose we're looking at a little bit of work around projects that have received planning permission, and the reasons that they haven't over time. But I certainly think the resource of the planning department is probably outside the scope of our centre. I suppose more, if I had another choice, something I've seen a lot over my career when I've been delivering projects is, I wish there was more time and more resources spent scoping projects properly with clients. Um, the biggest impact that you can have throughout a project is the really early stages of the design process, and getting that scope right with the client can be, well, first of all, I think it's an underestimated exercise that doesn't get enough time and energy directed towards it. I actually think there's a real skill in scoping client requirements properly. So I think if that was done properly at the start of a lot of projects, it would save a lot of delays and cost and inefficiencies and workarounds and contractual disputes that happen later on. So I suppose that would be the one I'd like to start at the start and get the client scope done properly.
Brilliant. If any companies want to learn more about Construct Innovate, or if there's any people even that want to, get educated on what you guys are up to, or where can I go to find you or Construct Innovate?
Yeah, so companies who want to find out a little bit more about the centre and what we're trying to do here, our website is www.constructinnovate.ie. Or if there's any information particularly about membership that you're looking for, if you just email info@constructinnovate.ie, they're the two ways that you can directly get in touch with us here. And a lot of the resources, and as I said, we're sort of still in startup mode. Over time, our website is where we sort of want that learning hub to be centered, where it can be sort of a one-stop shop for people trying to find out A, what's going on in the center, B, what's going on in the wider industry, and hopefully we'll have a learning hub and a library database there of resources that people who maybe want to find out about things like BIM can go and find out a little bit more about topics that we've researched and that they might find interesting.
Hugely valuable and well needed. So yeah, we'll link up those links in the show notes as well. But for the moment, Colm, thanks very much for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Not at all, Ciaran. Thanks for having me.
Climate Materials is brought to you by LiveCost, the construction software fully designed to manage your construction financial forecasts. Visit livecost.com to take a product tour, or reach out to our team of construction cost experts to transform your project profits. Any links mentioned during this episode, including speaker profiles or any other resources, are available on the podcast show notes. Your feedback is also welcome. We would really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave us a review, or email your comments, guest suggestions to hello@timeandmaterials.com. Finally, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm your host, Ciaran Brennan.